I'm Brandon Petrich. This is Sam Kabert, and you have joined Express Training Bites. Today, we are joined by an industry mogul. I'm going to go ahead and throw that word out there because this guy does everything. First and foremost, I have to admit, I am a total fanboy of everything that Sam does, from What Up to Eat Up, Clone Yourself, Mojo Mondays, Soul Seeker. He does it all. I've even reading his books. Look at those tabs. You know I'm reading those books. So I'm going to hand it over to Sam right now. He's going to talk to us a little bit about podcasting to build your brand and to generate those sales. So Sam, take it away, man.
Thank you, Brandon. That is quite the introduction, and the feeling is reciprocal. And it's cool because, I like to think that you and I came up together because we got into content around the same time, and we've been, joining each other's journeys together. So it's been fun. And what's it been? Maybe like 4 years or something, it feels like ish.
I think that's about right. Yeah, that sounds about right.
How many episodes are you up to on Promo Every Day?
Oh, man. So in 2 weeks, I'll be at 700.
Nice. That's amazing. 700. I can't even believe that. Okay. So I was just trying to make sure my mic's on. It is cool. Anyways, so 700 episodes of Promo Every Day. So podcasting, I've produced 9 podcasts to date. The first one went live January 17th, 2017. This is just like kind of free format, right, Brandon? More or less. I see you disappeared now. I'm just going to assume it is, and we're going to go with that. So, all right, the first podcast, basically, I looked around, was like, how do I stand out in Silicon Valley? Like, I'm a dude that sells swag. I'm a dude that sells promotional products, and not to demean our industry. Like, I mean, check out this awesome mug right here, courtesy of EMT and Tervis, and I think Peerless is part of that. There's a bunch of people. Anyways, swag is tight, right? But like in Silicon Valley, no one cares about that, right? Everyone wants like your startup, or what's this tech that you're doing, like going around saying like, oh, I sell swag. Obviously, I said it better than that, but it didn't resonate. So I started off doing chamber stuff, and then I worked my way up, and I was on 2 boards of nonprofits, and then I chaired a young professionals group for a while, and that started to help, position me differently than just another like promotional products distributor. And I really wanted to get into content marketing, so I think I started blogging in 2016. And then the first podcast, 2017, I literally grabbed my friend Sergio, who I still podcast with. I have my food show on YouTube called Eat Up Silicon Valley that Brandon referenced with him as well. And I grabbed him and I was like, Sergio, you are super charismatic. Everyone loves you. You know a ton of people. Please do this podcast with me. And he didn't want to do it. And eventually I convinced him. And then we have a third friend we did the young professional stuff with, named Palvinder, and he's got a video production company. So for us, luckily, or for me, I should say, I was set up with the right team. So when you start thinking about like content creation, even business, anything at all, like it all goes back to Napoleon Hill philosophies, think and grow rich, right? Create your mastermind or your think tank, create your team, right? And I forget the book, but get the right seats on the bus. You guys know that in terms of employees. So I had the right seats, right? I had the right players involved, and we launched. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. Straight up, we didn't know what we were doing. I like to say that it's like that scene in Zoolander where they're at the computers and they're like, it's inside the computer, and they don't really know what they're doing. That was us. We literally went to my laptop and we're like, okay, I guess you just hit record. We're talking straight into the computer, no mic or anything. We don't know what we're doing. And I started off not even knowing what we're going to say. And we say, welcome to the pilot podcast. And my co-host, I just started again. He still makes fun of me to this day for stuttering on the first one. But one of the funny things too is like, we launched, we didn't know what we were doing. It took us weeks to get onto iTunes because, pro tip, if you want to get into podcasting, iTunes is going to take usually about 2 to 3 weeks to approve your podcast. So now I always tell my clients that because no one told me that. And a lot of coaches don't tell their clients that, which is weird. So we'll get to that later. But the point is, we didn't know what we were doing. So I started listening to podcasts on how to podcast. I went to the National Podcast Convention. Yes, there is a podcast national convention similar to PPI Expo. And there's actually other trade organizations, or not, they wouldn't be trade organizations, but there's like Podfest, there's Podcast Movement. There's a few is my point. I went to Podcast Movement in Anaheim in 2017. So I was all in. I was like, okay, we need to figure this out, because my thing is like, just get started. And sometimes that's not the best approach, because you want to be a little bit more prepared than I was. But the point is like, it's paralysis by analysis for a lot of people because they overthink it. So by just getting started, it really helped me. And from there, the show just blossomed. We started to figure it out. And within 2 months, we interviewed a Super Bowl champion of the 49ers inside Levi's Stadium, where the Niners play, at the KNBR studio in the stadium. This is like the sports radio station in Silicon Valley. Like, I mean, pinch me, are you kidding me? Like, we're interviewing a Super Bowl champion on one of our first 10 episodes inside Levi's Stadium at the KNBR studio. Are you kidding? And within probably 3 or 4 months, we had 2 partnerships. We partnered up with the Silicon Valley Capital Club, which is like the most fancy networking club in Silicon Valley. Like, I don't get dressed up, but I would have to wear at least a polo and pants and shoes to get in. It was pretty frustrating, especially now that I live in Santa Cruz. Like, the idea of like wearing shoes, pants, and a collared shirt doesn't sound appealing, but I did back then. It's besides the point. We also partnered with the Silicon Valley Business Journal. So by partnering with these 2 clubs, having a Super Bowl champion, and then we started to have more and more legit guests, people started to turn their heads and be like, whoa, what are these guys up to? And especially since I started taking podcasting seriously, we were able to approach it with a more professional manner, if you will. So you guys want to know how podcasting increases your sales. Now, here's a secret, and promo code, I love you guys. So I'm giving everyone watching the secret, because usually this is more in my paid for type content. But the secret to podcasting is you're selling to your guests, not your listeners. So I'm not going to go in depth on this, but the basic concept is most people think of their podcasts as a way to sell to potential listeners. Now, here's the problem. Most of the time when people are listening to a podcast, they might be walking their dog, they might be running. Pre-COVID, they might be at the gym, or maybe you're at a home workout, whatever, but you're lifting weights. The point is, you could be driving, whatever you might be doing, your hands most of the time aren't occupied. So whenever you do an ad, like think Joe Rogan or whatever your favorite podcast is, there's the pre-roll, the mid-roll, and the end roll. So there's the beginning of the podcast, the middle of the podcast, and the end of the podcast that you have an opportunity to say an ad, right? Now, what is the likelihood that someone is actually going to take action on that ad? It's not very high. The reason why Rogan and the big podcast players do so well is because they have a ton of listeners. Like, most of us can't get close to that amount of listeners. Now, that's not to say you won't convert, you won't get sales out of your listeners. I have, and you will. But the real secret is by theming your podcast to something where it's the topic is something where you can interview your target demographic. You build rapport by having them on your podcast. And I'll tell you guys that I've had deeper conversations with people on my podcast than I've had with a lot of my friends. For example, we interviewed Jamie Baker, who is a retired NHL player for the San Jose Sharks. He was also a broadcaster for San Jose Sharks. And it went deep. It went really deep, so deep that by the end of the podcast, tears were coming down his face because we went so deep. And this is a podcast called What Up Silicon Valley, where it's about where we're interviewing movers and shakers. This isn't even my Soul Seeker podcast, where we intentionally go below the surface and go deep. The point is, by going deep or by having these interviews and relationships, you're building that rapport and you're building that know, like, and trust. And then naturally it's going to come out, hey, so what do you do for work? Do you actually make money off this? How I've always approached it is, here's some swag when I come in, usually with my logo. If it's a big guest, like maybe I'll put their company logo on and get some specs made. But basically, law of reciprocity, something that David Blaze has taught. And he's someone I learned from when I first got into this industry back in 2011. I'm a big believer in law of reciprocity. So I've always done that. And then it gets to the point where they typically say, oh, well, why don't I buy our swag from you? And I go, I don't know. Why don't you? And then I walk away with large sales. I tracked every single expense for my podcast for the first 18 months. And it was net guys, $60,000 positive after cost of goods sold, after whatever podcasting equipment I had, a cost of my virtual assistant team that manages my podcast, everything else. So after tracking the expenses and the profit coming in for 18 months and realizing, shoot, I made $60,000 so far off this thing. Like, why am I still tracking it? So I actually stopped tracking it a year and a half in, and it's been great. I haven't needed to. So I said I wasn't going to go that deep in the secret, but I did. I tend to do that. What else can I tell you guys about podcasting? So, okay, I mentioned that. Yeah. What's up, Brandon? You got any comments?
No, man, I wanted to chime in because, again, coming from a fanboy, I love hearing the back end stuff on, because everybody sits around with their friends and like, dude, we could do a show. Why don't we just start something? Why don't we just, and nobody ever really does it. But then to hear the story where you and Serge are just like, dude, let's just do it. Who cares? We've got this computer. Let's just talk into that little dot and make it happen. So that's really awesome to hear that story. I really do appreciate that. And thanks for going super in depth too. I know you didn't want to, but you did. And that's the other thing. You said that in your whole deal, like you've gotten deeper conversations with people through podcasting, and you just went deep on yourself in your own podcast. So.
Yeah, totally. And I tend to over deliver too. And I over deliver. So this is not about podcasting, but with my new coaching business with Clone Yourself, like I probably have like 10 freebies on my website, like lead magnets, like and stuff that if you take it serious, like it can like be transformational. So I tend to give too much away for free, but I don't know, something I need to work on, right?
So do you think, I want to ask you a question because there's a lot of people out there that, again, want to just start. And so I think that's always the number one thing. Just start. You know, don't chase perfect, just chase done. So what's the number one thing that you personally have learned just from doing your first podcast that has helped you create all of your other shows after to make that ease of creation easier?
That's a great question. Documenting the process as I go along, because what I didn't get into is about 6 months into that pilot podcast, we decided to rebrand What Up Silicon Valley to the Sam and Serge Show. And we changed What Up Silicon Valley as a media network. In the process, we recruited four friends to have podcasts on our network, because the idea was if we build this network that's bigger than ourselves and we have everyone contributing to it, then that's so much smarter than us all each having our own podcast and hustling, right? So as we went through that, I was launching Dating Silicon Valley because they call San Jose the heart of Silicon Valley, Man Jose. And there's a big thing about the dating scene out there. So we had a show called Dating Silicon Valley. We had Sweet Home Silicon Valley, which was the host. She's a realtor. So she talked about like events and history of neighborhoods and things like that. So it was good lead funnel to her business. And it was good for a lot of the transplants too, to hear about what's going on. And then we had That Valley Vibe, which was about like in the hustle and grind of Silicon Valley, like finding your center. And so those three, I guess it was 3 shows. So we had those 3 shows. So we're launching 3 shows all at once. So to do that, I needed to get really intentional. It was like, okay, when I first started, I needed to take action, right? Just to figure it out. But now that I figured it out, it was like kind of looking backwards and like, okay, what pieces do we need? It's like a puzzle, right? Okay, so we need a logo, obviously. We need a name. We got the name. We need intro music. Okay, let's do that. Okay, we're going to need copy for the intro music or for the intro and all that. Okay, what else are we going to need? Well, we're going to need to know what you're going to talk about. So I came up with, you actually have it in your book there, the quarterly content generator. So yeah. So this thing's awesome. Basically for Mojo Mondays, which is a podcast I used to have that Brandon mentioned, I just jotted down a bunch of topics that I wanted to talk about as it relates to like positive thinking, self-development, businessy type stuff, whatever. So I might write down like you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with most, or Brandon said done is better than perfect. I might write that down, or it might be like if it's not on your calendar, it doesn't exist, or things like that, right? So I write down as many as I can in one column, and then I put 1 at the very first one. Then the next one, if it relates to the first one, then I put 1. If not, then I put 2. Then I try to keep it to 3 or 4 what become categories. Then I look at the numbers, and then I put all the 1s together, all the 2s together, all the 3s together, and then say, just for this example, let's say that there's 4 1s and there's 4 2s and there's 4 3s. That gives me 3 months of content, right? Because I have 4 topics in each category, in each bucket. Now I want to make it sequential. So if we're talking about like done is better than perfect, and if it's not on your calendar, it doesn't exist, like those 2, right? I could say that those are in the same category, depending on what the other 20 or whatever topics are, but we're going to say they're in the same category. Okay. So I would say that I need to think about it. Done is better than perfect, or if it's not on your calendar, it doesn't exist. Mindset, I'd probably go with done is better than perfect first to get us in the mindset. And then I build in, but it can go either way, like however you want to tell the story, right? But from there, you're building out your episode guide. And now all of a sudden, like for Mojo Mondays, for example, I would have 3 months worth of content in this quarterly content generator. Now all I need to do is go record the whole thing, which that's a whole nother topic about how to record it. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
No, that's awesome. I love that because that is, I mean, obviously with you referenced my show, Promo Day. The hardest part about mine is the sponsorship, right? So once we have the name, once we have the sponsor, that's easy. Now the product comes in, I just look at the product, I talk about it for a minute and a half, and it's good. So coming up with content for my show is super easy. But yeah, I didn't even think about that. When you're doing a podcast, you have to stay relevant and then also on topic. So you do need to plan all that out. But if you do it in that system you just explained, you can come up with a ton of content really fast, or ideas that you can talk about. And then, yeah, the hard work's done. That's awesome.
Right. And what I love about the quarterly content generator worksheet, which I can put in the show notes after, I'll link it, is you can swap out the name and call it like the quarterly sales planner or whatever. You can apply it to your blogs, your videos, your email blasts, your sales approach, like literally anything. So yeah, it's just a great way to, like another episode I had of Mojo Mondays was my $ system. So Brandon, let me know if this resonates with you, but I have this to-do list that our parent company is in the office supply industry. So we have this to-do list. What it says is do it now and do it later on the other side. So I just love it because the way it has like your brain work, right? Whatever. But the point is, whenever I make a list, I usually put a star down, and similar to what I just explained. Like the first thing I put 1 star, then the next thing, if it's more important, I'd put 2 stars. And then the next, if it's more important, I'd put 3, or I put 1 or 2, right? Have you ever done anything like that?
No.
Okay. So that helps me prioritize what to get done. So I changed this in like 2015 or something from stars to $. And I changed it to what's going to make me the most money, because I was very sales focused at the time and building my business. So, and instead of being like, oh, this is the most important, I was like, well, is that a revenue generating task? And it would put the $ down. So that really helped me build my business too. Yeah.
I love that, dude. I love it. I think a friend of ours used to say all the time, if it doesn't make me happy or make me money, I'm not going to do it. So I love the $. That's awesome.
It's good for anyone that's, what's the word? Sales driven, I guess. I didn't want to say money hungry. What's the word I'm looking for? It's sales motivated. I think that's the word. Yeah.
But that's awesome.
Another thing I wanted to tell you guys is, when you're theming your show, right? So this is what I was talking about, where you want to, if you're going to sell to your guests, you need to be mindful of the topic of your show so that you can ask guests to be on your show that you can actually sell to. Another thing too that we just talked about is like a solo cast, which is like what we talked about, the quarterly content generator, me talking in the mic by myself. with Mojo Mondays versus an interview show. If you have an interview show, it's not going to be as much where you need to plan ahead in terms of like the structure in the episodes because you're interviewing people, but it would be nice if you could. And then always try to stay 2 to 3 weeks in advance. And I have a course called Permission to Podcast. So if you guys want to learn more, I teach you how to simply show up and record so that all you need to do is show up and record and you build a virtual assistant team around you. So definitely reach out if you're interested in creating content.
How would they reach out, Sam?
Great question. Well, this is Facebook. So I guess you guys could just message me here. You could go to cloneyourselfuniversity.com and you could grab any of those freebies over there. There's a contact form, all that type of stuff. Oh, one more thing on my course. So Permission Podcast, simply show up and record. Here's the thing, Brandon, you know this as a video guy, right? But for podcasting, after producing 9 podcasts and talking to other podcasters, I know that if you want to have your show like on social media with like snippets of the show and all like the whole 9 yards and do it like big production, like how I do Soul Seeker, it's going to take you 5 hours just to edit and promote your podcast. That does not even include the time to actually record the podcast. So you have 3 options. Either you spend 20 hours of your own time a month, because 4 episodes a month, editing and promoting, or you hire it out to an agency where you get that 20 hours back, but you're spending around $2,000 for that agency. Or you build a virtual assistant team. And I know from doing this with my team that your spend will be less than $500. In fact, my spend is less than $400 a month. You get 20 hours back of your time and you only spend less than $400 a month to have a team support you in your podcast. So
that is great advice out there, especially for those distributors in our promo industry that are out there hustling for the sales and hustling just working inside of their business, but they also want to create that content. The virtual assistants give you that time back. I mean, that is so, that's the 3rd time I've held up your book, link in the bio, whatever those YouTube kids say. But I'm going to look through the Facebook comments here real quick. We have Walter Kirk say, what's up? What's up, guys? Jessica Onion says, cool to hear a little bit about how you found your niche. So that's kind of cool. Eric Campbell here says, 6 months into my live show, I started on a whim. Sometimes you just have to start. Yeah, I totally agree, Eric. That is absolutely correct. And then Jessica, one more time, chimes in and says, those content generators, organizational processes are great. So you've got a bunch of fans out there. You know I'm a fanboy. Sam, thank you so much. Again, one more time, tell everybody here how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, cloneyourselfuniversity.com. That's my coaching platform where I teach people how to work less and make more so they can live more. That's what it's all about. The 4-hour work week is still a dream for me, but I'll take the 4-hour work day any day of the week, right? So
that's awesome, man. Sam, thank you so much for being with me. And that's going to do it for Express Training Bites here at Promo Corner on Facebook. We'll see you guys next Thursday.